Our next candidate is a fourth generation Angelino. He grew up in Encino. He taught as a professor at USC and Occidental College. He became the city council representative for District 13, which is my district, in 2004. Just sort of off the cuff, we actually endorsed Eric Garcetti for councilman in that very first election, and I remember one of our activists with her pugs in a baby carriage going from apartment building to apartment building for Eric Garcetti. During his years on the council, he has reduced crime in the district 66%. Graffiti's been reduced by 80%, and our city council district is #1 in job growth in the city. Please welcome Councilman Eric Garcetti.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. Great to see friends, folks that I've collaborated with over the years, and I'm really excited to be before you as a candidate for mayor with only 16 days left, but who's counting, right? 16 days until the first round, and then 80 days later, and in 96 days we'll know who the next mayor of Los Angeles is. And for me, this is an important moment in our city's history. It's an important moment for us to line up and say, not just what we'll do, not just what we've done, but what are our values? Who are we as a city? And I think many times our lives go so quickly, we don't have these moments to punctuate, to stop, to think, to reflect, and to say, what sort of a city do we want to be? We become reactive, we say all the things that we're against, but we never get to be proactive, to say the things that we're for, that we want to do. So thank you for creating this space and this place to do that. Because for me, one of the central values of this city is life and how we treat it. It's a central value. You can't talk about your program if you don't begin first with what your values are about the dignity of life of all. And that means that my constituents aren't just human beings. My constituents are the wild and domesticated animals that are our friends, that are among us. That is something that every day I bear responsibility for as an elected official now. And I'm very honored to be in a great field with really great and caring people. We are lucky in Los Angeles. We don't have a situation of unethical or unintelligent candidates. I can say that about all five that you'll hear from. Even YJ Draymond, who I know is back there, one of our mayoral candidates. He always gets shut out of the debates, but I'd love to have him up here one day. But all of us that are here, I think, come from a place of wanting to do what is right. So let me walk through the record of what I have done. I was so honored to have the league's endorsement when I first ran, and it was a risk. There were, back then, 13 really good candidates running for a city council seat, and all of us shared similar politics. But there's two things in your assessment. One, does somebody have the right values, and does somebody have the proven track record to get things done? For me, the issue of humane, welfare, animal rights has been critical to what we do in the last 10 years. Not only because it's right, but because it costs us all so much money when we do it wrong. We spend, and I care a lot about homelessness, but homeless individuals, human beings as well. And I talk to a lot of people about that, and I say, I hope we all care about that issue just from an ethical perspective. But I often say, look, even if you don't, it costs us so much more to keep homeless people on the street in a $20,000 emergency room visit, in the services that we provide, in the crime that spills out, than the $5,000 a year that you can put somebody with services in housing. And it's the same thing with animals. The death culture is so expensive in the city, and it has to end. So, a long time ago, I embraced, and fully do embrace, and as mayor will embrace, a no-kill Los Angeles, a place where we stop the killing, where we stop euthanasia, where we stop the contradictions that we've had and have worked on this, whether it's to end puppy mills, because people are, on one hand, selling animals while we're killing them with the other. It was not right, and facing a lot of criticism. I mean, it's easy to come here. If I was in front of a different group, I'd be saying the exact same thing. I don't change what I say depending on the group, because in my profession, it's not just as a candidate for the last 11 years, and in this, I was joking with my wife the other night. I said, I assume when I'm talking to you in our own home, it's being YouTubed, because when you ever say, in this day and age, everybody has a cell phone camera, and if you ever say different things in different places, it will come out. And so we've moved towards that in a lot of different ways. One way, when I was on the Budget and Finance Committee of the City Council, it was important. This was before the recession, before the tough times, when we were increasing the amount that it costs to license an animal. a lot of people were saying, great, we'll take that money and we'll put it to the general fund. And I said, no. I said, if we're going to be doing that, we should be saving all of that money and putting it into low-income spay-neuter vouchers in the city of Los Angeles. And we did. And I think they're a very tough negotiator. They tried to say, well, let's just do half into the general fund and half into, these programs. And I said, how about 100%? They said, okay, what about if we did 75% in there and 25% for the general fund? I said, how about 100%? We got 100% of that put there. And it is there today, but it is not enough. So as we recover, again, and even before we recover, if we're looking to save money in the city, a lot of people talk about efficiencies and this, that, and the other. One of the quickest ways we can save money in the city is by having fewer people kill our animals. And that can be done over time as people retire to make sure that part of what animal services goes away. And we can do that with investments and with proactive folks who are in the community. I'd like to see a core not only of volunteers that we have in the city, who go through a training almost like reserve police officers who can go door to door and talk to people about licensing, talk to people about opportunities to spay and neuter their pets, but also to make sure that we have the personnel in the animal services department back that in these recent years have been cut to go out there and to do that. They can pay for their own jobs. I've talked to a couple of people. If we do it right, I mean, a couple of years ago, we were looking at the Animal Services website, and the only way to get a license was to print something out, write it and send it in. It should be, yesterday you can do that online to get our licenses, our fees, and I brought that sort of technological experience, moving our city's email, for instance, away from 70 servers that we used to have guarded by 13 people in programming languages that didn't exist. Today, we have those services done in the cloud by Google, and a lot of people said, oh my gosh, it's almost equivalent of asking you to come to work riding on horses or something. It was so foreign for us, but we save millions of dollars each year because we know that there's more efficient ways to do technology and systems, and that's a really important part. Second, a very strong supporter of getting up an animal cruelty task force. And in the city of Los Angeles, people know, the way that they did it a few years ago, that if you commit crimes against animals, we're going to treat them as seriously as crimes against human beings. And that has to be, I really think this is a big difference. I see my colleague Paul Perez here, who has been my inspiration and my champion. I have a little bracelet that says WWPD, what would Paul do? But I asked myself. Another thing that Paul led the way, and I was very happy to support on, was Meatless Mondays, to look at ways that we can figure out ways for us to have voices and choices and promote as a city, again, an ethical way of getting people towards eating less meat, having less destruction in the way that food is obtained in our culture. And then the use of animals in our services. I've been very proud to work with Paul and to work with many of you here. And I do believe that we will pass in the coming months something that will, certainly for elephants, although I've supported for all of the animals in circus, to say we can have other beautiful, great circuses without raising children. And folks say, kids love this. It's only because it's perpetuated each generation that that's something they should expect. And if we give them a different expectation, it will be just as excited to see jugglers and trapeze artists and everything else in a circus without knowing that those beautiful creatures that you see are shoved back into a cage and put on a train to go to the next city with no life. So for me, that is an important thing. I've also worked beyond just local issues to try to be, the power of Los Angeles is also what we can do to be a strong voice at the state level. And as mayor, I will continue to do what I've done as council member. For instance, recently when many folks were working on making sure that we could ban mountain lion hunting in the state, to be able to pick up the phone, I went up there, I picked up the phone, I called folks in Sacramento, a couple people who were wavering, who became the deciding votes to get it out of committee. Those are quiet things that I do. I don't talk a lot about them. We put them out there, make sure we organize folks. But you can count on me as a mayor at the national and state to take this platform of mayor of the second largest city and to advocate for humane laws at the state and national level. And then lastly, I would say that for me, the real goal, and I appreciate that Emanuel was leaving, thanks Emanuel for saying this, that we really now need to focus in those areas of the city where when we ask why animals are not spayed and neutered, why that doesn't happen, it's because just like our schools, when we say, why aren't our schools getting better? Can't the school district just fix that? There's a whole set of social ills that come into that last moment and that last issue. So while I've been very supportive of mandatory spay and neutering, it's important for us to also step up with our actions and our resources to help that be a reality for folks who are just trying to survive themselves. who are working many jobs, who are dealing with poverty, where we have throughout the city undiagnosed mental conditions, where we have all of these things. I mean, I see homeless individuals sometimes with their pets, with their animals, with their friends that are out on the street, and if they're undiagnosed mentally, can you imagine what's happening between the relationship with them and the conditions for their animal as well? So we need to step up and look at where we can focus, and as mayor, it would be my top priority at the beginning. If folks want to know, in the first year of an Eric Garcetti administration, it's going to be to pour resources into our lowest income areas, to educate in multiple languages, not just Spanish and English, but across the board in our immigrant communities. This is something, I represent a district that's probably the most immigrant in the city. About 65% of my residents are immigrants. And we're in a city where 65% of folks are either immigrants or children of immigrants. And if you want somebody who has the cultural fluency to be able to go in to understand that, we're going to come in and see what we can do, both with private partnerships and nonprofit partnerships, and with city resources as we get those back in coming years. That's my first priority inside the department, because once you start doing that, the savings start to come in other ways, and we can look at other programs and other things that we can do to get to a no-kill city indeed. Lastly, I want to thank you all for the work that you do. I mean, most of you make nothing or very little doing what you do. So it's like neighborhood council volunteers. I always say, I know you do this for the high levels of pay and the benefits that you get from the work that you do. But without you, I mean, you are the force multiplier. Like, we can do only this much as a city. What I look at in this room is folks who have inspired me, folks who have saved more lives than we could count here, people who have given the greatest gifts. I know what it's like. My wife and I had a cat for many years, the Snagglepuss, who had one eye, no voice because all of her siblings had been taken away from her, and she meowed herself at a very early age out of a voice, who had been attacked by wildlife, and just, I mean, literally it's the 9 lives. She was like on her 8th or 9th life with us, but she was the center of our household, somebody who, for all of us, we rushed home to see. She's no longer with us, so as soon as I get elected, I'm a little busy, but I'm sure I'll have about 15 offers of folks who have some really great cats, but we'll bring another one back. But it's a reflection of who we are, how we treat those animals that are around us. And the last piece, one other thing too, is our wild animals. In a city that continues to grow, we have to figure out better ways and better systems to make sure. I agree with the call to have more officers out there, but dealing with and educating folks about making sure that those animals that are wild stay wild, that we can keep coyotes being coyotes instead of, get them to where they need to be and where they can feel safe, where people don't trap and kill animals just because they're underneath their house, where we can work with the county and the state to figure out humane ways of trapping and releasing if necessary, because I know there are laws that prevent that right now. You have to kill an animal trapped. And I know there's all sorts of habitat reasons, but there's better ways that we can find to make sure that even their lives are not forgotten. We very much focus on domestic animals, but we also are living in a very wild city, and it's one of the great things about being in Los Angeles is that moment when you stop at a canyon and see a deer, when you see a coyote running away from you, you realize that we are not the only ones here. So I will be a steward, I will be a leader, I have a proven track record, and it would be my honor to have your endorsement once again. And if there's anything, I know we're not doing questions, but if you ever wanted to, Eric Garcetti@gmail is my personal email.